Hi, we're going to talk about using warmers in the classroom. These are basically short, engaging activities that we use with learners at the start of the class to get them into the right frame of mind for learning or warm them up. It's really important for learners to feel comfortable in the classroom, and warmers really help them to get into what you're going to do and be in the right frame of mind. They also help to reiterate or reinforce the material that you've previously covered and build their confidence in it. Um, as the teacher, you can informally assess your learners on the material that you expect them to know before you move on or before you build on that area. And while it's not the main reason we use a warmer, obviously, it does help to ensure that you've got all your learners in the classroom, or most of them, before you move on to new material. But obviously, the main reason is to warm the learners up and get them into the swing of learning. Let's look at some examples of warmers that you might find useful to adapt to use in your classroom. You could play back to the board. This is a game where you have a learner sitting, obviously, with their back to the board. They can't see what you're writing and they face the other learners in the class. You write a word, a phrase on the board that other learners must describe to the one who can't see the board. Once the learner guesses it correctly, you move on and put another term on the board. You could play it in a competitive way to make it a bit more interesting, and you can have two learners sitting both with their backs to the board. And you split the class in two. So half of the class describes the word or the expression to one learner, and the other half describe to the other learner. And you could put two separate phrases or terms on the board to be described. Once they've got it right, you put another one on for them to carry on describing. And at the end of the, let's say, 5 minutes, whoever's got the most expressions correctly described is the winning team. It's a bit fun and it's good review. You could give them discussion questions to talk about in pairs or in small groups. You could build on that by giving them questions with a word or two missing or a word in the wrong form and they have to correct it and then ask each other questions. That the speaking activities usually get them really involved in the lesson. You could have learners describe a word or expression or a concept that you'd like them to cover. And that helps them to recap on what they should already know. You could build on that by providing them with some words that they can't use when they're describing to their partner or partners. You could play hangman. But this, I should stress, um, should only really be used with low level learners or learners who have particular difficulty with spelling. It's not really that interactive unless you get them to, once they've guessed what the word is, they then have to explain what it is and what it means and maybe give some examples of it. Um, Otherwise, certainly for higher levels, I would avoid that activity. You could have a spot the difference activity where you give each person in a pair a different picture, similar pictures with some differences, that they have to describe to each other. They can't show each other their picture. And by communicating, by talking, hopefully they will notice some of the differences between their pictures. You could have a mingling activity where you give each learner a question or a couple of questions that they have to walk around and ask everybody in the class. It's always good to give each learner a different question so that it makes it more interesting when they're mingling and they're not hearing the same question answered over and over again. You could give them a problem to solve. It could be a mathematical problem, it could be linguistic, it could be related to the concept of the subject that you're teaching. It could be something to do with college. Just a short, quick problem that they have to find a solution to. You could give them sentences that are all jumbled up, so they have to put the words into the right order. This could be practicing some linguistic point that you're teaching if you're a language teacher. It could be about some new concepts that you've taught learners in the previous class. You could give them a text or a few sentences that have some mistakes in them. They might be grammatical or sort of lexical mistakes. It could be mistakes in the concept of the idea. Whatever is relevant to your field in the classroom. You could give them a quick quiz to recap on the main areas that were covered in the previous lesson, or in fact, in the previous couple of lessons. Some tips. Always keep warmers to about 5 minutes. Beyond that, it's not really a warmer, but more like a task or an activity. So a warmer should be quick, short, and engaging. Try not to correct the learner's mistakes during the warmer so that you're building their confidence. Obviously, if there are some major errors, you might want to highlight them, perhaps once the activity has finished, unless it's going to hinder their progress of that task. If there are quite a few mistakes, you could look through them later, but not during the activity, just because you want to encourage them to get into the lesson and be confident in the material. When you use a warmer, ensure that the language that you use is familiar to the learners so that they can get straight into the activity without getting hung up on new words or new expressions that are used in the questions, because otherwise you'll be having to explain what they mean or elicit, even better, the meaning from the learners. And then you're starting to teach rather than get into a fun activity. Always have the learners working in pairs or small groups so that they're all engaged and all involved. If you're asking learners individual questions, it's not really a warmer. Finally, always make it fun. If you make the first activity of your class fun, the rest of the lesson will have a positive beat to it and the learners will be motivated and engaged. There are a couple of websites that you can have a look at. If you scan the QR codes at the top of the screen, they'll take you to some websites with some more ideas for you to use. Thanks for watching.